Hello everyone, and welcome back to Gone Legends. In today's video, we remember two beloved figures who left us recently. Artists, actors, and creators whose lives changed entertainment forever. Before we begin, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Now, let's celebrate their remarkable stories.
Today, we speak of a man whose life began in the spotlight, but whose greatest legacy was not fame. It was love, healing, and purpose. This is the story of Floyd Roger Meyers Jr. born August 17, 1983, in Washington, D.C., and passed away at just 42 years old, following a heart attack in his Maryland home. A life too short, but never small. From the time Floyd was young, he had something that could not be taught. A warmth, a spirit, a presence that drew others toward him. At just 9 years old, he stepped into the world of television. Not just any role, but portraying the young version of Will Smith on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It was the episode titled, "Will Gets Committed," that aired in 1992. Millions of households saw his smile, his energy, his spark. He didn't just play young Will Smith. He embodied everything that made Will captivating: charisma, humor, heart. Just months later, Floyd did something extraordinary again. He stepped into another major role, young Marlon Jackson, in the 5-hour ABC miniseries The Jacksons, An American Dream. There he was, a child among legends, yet never overshadowed. He didn't chase fame. Fame came to him. His family and friends remember it clearly. He was still humble, still kind, still grounded. Even when the lights were bright. Some people shine because they want to be seen. But Floyd shined because he was light itself. As Floyd became older, life shifted. He stepped away from Hollywood. Not because he couldn't continue, but because he felt called to something deeper. The world saw him as an actor. But Floyd saw himself as something more. A listener. A healer. A guide. He believed that men deserved safe spaces, places where they could breathe, speak, feel, and heal without judgment. So Floyd co-founded the Fellowship Men's Group, a non-profit dedicated to emotional wellness, brotherhood, and mental healing. He wasn't just a member. He was a pillar. A leader who led not with ego, but with heart. A man who didn't preach strength. He showed it by being open, vulnerable, honest. One member of the community said, "He didn't just talk. He transformed people." His life was no longer about what he could get, but what he could give. And he gave everything. For years, Floyd battled heart issues. Quietly, privately, without burdening others. On Wednesday, surrounded by the ordinary routine of life, his heart gave out. The news came like a shockwave. No warning. No preparation. A bright soul. Gone too soon. His mother Renee confirmed the heartbreaking news. His sister, Thierry, stepped forward to help the family through the unimaginable. Friends, fans, and strangers flooded social media with memories. But the deepest ache rested in the hearts of those who loved him most. His 4 children, Talone, Kinsley, Tyler, and little Knox. They did not just lose a father. They lost their teacher, their protector, their hero. Those who knew him say the same words again and again. He was love. He was warmth. He made people better. And that is a legacy no fame can outshine. There are people who appear in this world for a brief time, yet their impact lasts forever. Floyd Roger Meyers Jr. was one of those people. Though his childhood was spent in front of cameras, his adulthood was spent lifting others. He gave men permission to speak their pain. He gave lost souls a place to return to themselves. He turned conversation into healing. He turned brotherhood into medicine. His work continues. His mission continues. Because healing continues. As his organization said, "Gone but never forgotten." The mission will continue in your honor. In this world, some lives burn fast and bright, while others glow like a candle in the dark, showing the way for others. Floyd didn't need fame to be important. He already was. He didn't need applause to make an impact. He already did. And though his life ended at 42, his story does not. Because every person who learned to breathe again because of him. Every man who found strength through vulnerability. Every child who carries his memory. They are his legacy. This has been Gone Legends. Today, we honor a man whose greatness was quiet, but powerful. Floyd Roger Meyers Jr. August 17, 1983, age 42. A son. A father. An actor. A healer. A light. Your journey ended, but the lives you touched continue forward. Rest in peace, Floyd. Your spirit lives on. In the concrete heart of Manhattan, where art and grit collide, a legend was born. Robert Anthony De Niro Jr. came into the world on August 17, 1943, in Greenwich Village, New York City. He was the only child of two passionate artists, Robert De Niro Sr., an abstract painter and sculptor, and Virginia Admiral, a poet and painter. From birth, creativity pulsed through his veins. But his home life was far from ordinary. His parents' marriage, though filled with love and artistry, fell apart when Robert was just 2 years old. His father came out as gay, an act of bravery at a time when such honesty was nearly unthinkable, and his parents quietly separated. Raised primarily by his mother in a small Manhattan apartment, young Robert grew up surrounded by canvases, paintbrushes, and the energy of New York's bohemian art scene. He was shy, quiet, observant, a boy who said little but noticed everything. He found comfort not in words, but in the world around him. He'd walk the busy streets of Greenwich Village, watching people, studying their movements, their expressions, their emotions. Even then, he was unknowingly training for the life that awaited him, one where observation would become his greatest tool. At school, he was nicknamed Bobby Milk for his pale skin and quiet demeanor. He was small, thin, and often overlooked. But when he discovered acting at age 10, something inside him changed. His first role? The Cowardly Lion in a school production of The Wizard of Oz. That moment, the first time he stepped on stage, hearing the applause, feeling the light, was transformative. It was as if the timid boy disappeared, replaced by someone fearless. As a teenager, De Niro attended the prestigious High School of Music and Art, but dropped out at 16 to pursue acting full-time, a risky move in a city that eats dreams for breakfast. But he was determined. He began training under the legendary acting teachers Stella Adler and Lee Strasberg, immersing himself in the world of method acting, a discipline that demanded total emotional truth. To De Niro, acting wasn't pretending, it was transformation. He would later say, "The talent is in the choices." And those choices, quiet, calculated, and brave, would turn a shy boy from New York into one of the greatest actors the world has ever known. The streets of New York were his first stage. Long before the Oscars, long before the fame, Robert De Niro was just another struggling actor hustling through the city that never sleeps. In the early 1960s, he worked small roles in off-Broadway productions, student films, and low-budget features. He auditioned endlessly, and was rejected just as often. But with every no, he grew sharper, tougher, and more determined. His method acting roots guided him like a compass. He didn't just study characters, he lived them. For him, truth was everything. In those years, New York's young, ambitious filmmakers were starting to make noise. Directors like Brian De Palma, Francis Ford Coppola, and a scrappy kid from Little Italy named Martin Scorsese. De Niro's first real break came when Brian De Palma cast him in Greetings, 1968, a dark comedy that satirized the Vietnam War. It wasn't a major hit, but it was a start, and it showed Hollywood that this quiet, intense young man had something different. For several years, he worked in obscurity, honing his craft, waiting for the right role. That moment came in 1973, when fate brought him together with Martin Scorsese for a small film that would change everything. Mean Streets. De Niro played Johnny Boy, a reckless young gangster whose charm and volatility lit up every frame. He was magnetic, unpredictable yet utterly real. He didn't act like he was from the streets. He was the streets. The film exploded onto the scene, and suddenly, Robert De Niro wasn't just another actor. He was the actor. His performance caught the attention of Francis Ford Coppola, who was casting for The Godfather Part II. In 1974, De Niro was chosen to play the young Vito Corleone, taking on the legacy of Marlon Brando himself. It was an impossible task, but De Niro didn't imitate Brando. He became the man who would become Don Corleone. He learned to speak Sicilian dialect fluently for the role, immersing himself completely in the culture and mannerisms. The result was nothing short of cinematic brilliance. For that performance, De Niro won his first Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. The boy from Greenwich Village, the kid once called Bobby Milk, had now stepped into immortality. But this was only the beginning. De Niro's intensity, his dedication, and his quiet obsession with perfection drew him and Scorsese together again. Their partnership would soon redefine American cinema. With Taxi Driver, 1976, De Niro took audiences into the mind of a man unraveling, Travis Bickle, the lonely cab driver who became a symbol of urban despair. He trained as an actual taxi driver for weeks, driving around New York's seediest streets. And from that film came one of the most iconic lines in movie history. "You talkin' to me?" It wasn't in the script. De Niro improvised it, and it became a legend. That moment captured everything about his art: instinctive, dangerous, and undeniably human. By the end of the 1970s, De Niro wasn't just a great actor. He was the new face of realism in cinema. And every performance carried the weight of a man who had lived 1,000 lives through his characters. After Taxi Driver, Robert De Niro had already proven he could play broken men with terrifying honesty. But in 1980, he would go further than any actor before him, into the mind, body, and soul of a man consumed by his own rage. The film was Raging Bull, directed once again by Martin Scorsese. De Niro played Jake LaMotta, the real-life boxer whose brilliance in the ring was matched only by his self-destruction outside it. To prepare for the role, De Niro trained for over a year with the real Jake LaMotta, sparring daily, bleeding, sweating, and transforming himself from actor to athlete. He even entered 3 official boxing matches, and won 2 of them. But that wasn't enough. For the film's later scenes, portraying LaMotta's decline, De Niro gained over 60 pounds, eating his way into obesity so he could show the ravages of time and guilt on the man's body. His transformation was brutal, both physically and emotionally. Scorsese later said, "I was worried for him. He was pushing himself beyond what was safe." But that's De Niro. When he commits, he disappears. The performance was raw, painful, and completely human. When Raging Bull premiered, critics were stunned. De Niro's portrayal of self-destruction, the violence, the jealousy, the loneliness, felt too real. It wasn't just acting, it was confession. He won his second Academy Award, this time for Best Actor, but the prize was almost irrelevant. The world now understood, Robert De Niro wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing truth. But such intensity came with a price. De Niro had always been private, almost mysterious. He avoided interviews, never explained his methods, and rarely smiled for cameras. While others basked in Hollywood's glamour, De Niro withdrew into his work, creating a wall between the man and the myth. His dedication to realism sometimes frightened directors and co-stars. He would live as his characters for months, changing his voice, his walk, even his heartbeat. For The Deer Hunter, he studied trauma survivors. For Cape Fear, he paid a dentist $20,000 to make his teeth look cracked and rotten, then spent thousands more to fix them afterward. It wasn't about vanity. It was about truth. But behind that devotion, there was isolation. De Niro's life was filled with long hours, sleepless nights, and deep emotional investment. He sacrificed comfort for authenticity, family time for preparation, and sometimes, happiness for perfection. Fame had found him, but peace rarely did. Still, for De Niro, art was life. And in every role, he found a reflection of himself, the rage, the control, the silence, the humanity. As the 1980s closed, he stood not just as an actor, but as a force of nature, the man who had changed acting forever. He was no longer playing men. He was them. By the 1990s, Robert De Niro had become more than an actor. He was a myth. Every role he took carried the weight of expectation, the aura of danger, and the quiet brilliance of a man who didn't just perform. He transformed. The 1980s had made him a star. The 1990s would make him a legend. In 1990, he reunited with Martin Scorsese for what many still call the greatest gangster film ever made, Goodfellas. As Jimmy Conway, De Niro didn't shout, didn't posture. He didn't need to. With one look, one pause, one slow smile, he could terrify or captivate an audience. The film was a masterpiece, and De Niro was its heartbeat. He made the ordinary feel lethal, the calm feel deadly. Critics and audiences agreed. De Niro was the embodiment of authenticity. He wasn't pretending to be a gangster. He was showing us what power, greed, and loyalty looked like from the inside. Then, just 5 years later, came Casino, 1995. Another Scorsese-De Niro collaboration. Another exploration of loyalty, ambition, and destruction. As Sam Ace Rothstein, De Niro gave one of his most disciplined, haunting performances, a man who built an empire but couldn't control the chaos around him. He portrayed restraint, elegance, and obsession like no one else. Each movement was calculated, every word carried weight. Behind the camera, De Niro was also growing, learning how to tell stories, not just star in them. In 1993, he made his directorial debut with A Bronx Tale, a deeply personal story about loyalty and fatherhood in the Bronx, the place where his own journey began. The film was quiet but powerful, showing another side of him, the storyteller, the philosopher, the teacher. He was no longer just the face of cinema. He was becoming its conscience. During this era, De Niro became known for roles that balanced danger with dignity. Heat, Ronin, Cape Fear, Awakenings, The Mission. He could be a criminal, a cop, a priest, a father, a monster, or a saint, and every time, you believed him completely. That was his gift, truth. No matter how dark, no matter how ugly, De Niro made it real. But while his on-screen persona was fierce, off-screen, he remained reserved, humble, even shy. He avoided the Hollywood spotlight, rarely attended parties, and preferred to walk the streets of New York like an ordinary man. He invested in restaurants, real estate, and eventually co-founded the Tribeca Film Festival in 2002, a movement to revive downtown Manhattan after the tragedy of 9/11. For him, art was more than entertainment. It was healing. By the end of the 1990s, Robert De Niro had built a career so monumental that his name became a synonym for greatness. Actors didn't compare themselves to each other anymore. They compared themselves to De Niro. He wasn't just the face of an era. He was the era. Behind the brilliance, behind the power and perfection, Robert De Niro was always a man of mystery. He lived quietly, away from the cameras, rarely revealing what he truly felt. While his characters burned with rage, heartbreak, and fire, the man himself remained a shadow. But even legends are human. And De Niro's life, like his films, was marked by both triumph and tragedy. In the 2000s, the world watched as he continued to reinvent himself, balancing intense dramas with moments of humor and humility. He starred in Meet the Parents, Silver Linings Playbook, The Intern, and later, The Irishman, each one proving that age couldn't dull his instincts. Even when he played flawed or broken men, his performances carried the same authenticity that defined him in his youth. But behind the scenes, De Niro faced challenges far heavier than the ones written in scripts. In 2003, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. For the first time, the fighter who had embodied so many powerful men found himself in a real battle, one for his own life. He faced it privately, quietly, and recovered fully, returning to work soon after. He didn't seek sympathy. He simply kept moving forward. Then came heartbreak, the kind that no award could ease. In 2018, De Niro lost his beloved grandson, Leandro De Niro Rodriguez, to a tragic overdose. It was a wound that cut deep, a loss that no script could prepare him for. When he finally spoke about it, his voice was quiet, steady, and filled with sorrow. He said, "It shouldn't have happened. You always think there's time to fix things, until there isn't." Even through grief, he stood strong, the same way he always had, with quiet endurance and dignity. Throughout his life, De Niro has guarded his personal world fiercely. Marriages, heartbreak, fatherhood, he's never let the cameras see more than he chose to show. He once said, "You don't owe the public your soul. You owe them your best work." And that's what he gave, every single time. As he aged, he didn't chase fame, he chased meaning. He spent more time mentoring young filmmakers, supporting the Tribeca Film Festival, and nurturing the next generation of storytellers. To De Niro, art was not just performance, it was connection, empathy, and truth. His friendship with Martin Scorsese endured across 6 decades and 10 films. From Mean Streets to Killers of the Flower Moon, their partnership became one of cinema's greatest alliances, a living testament to trust, loyalty, and creative genius. And through it all, De Niro never stopped being a son of New York. The city that raised him, that inspired him, that gave him his grit, he never left it behind. He once said, "New York isn't just where I live. It's who I am." Robert De Niro's legacy is carved not in marble, but in moments, a glance, a silence, a single line delivered with truth. He taught the world that acting isn't about pretending. It's about becoming. He showed us that the real power of cinema is empathy, the ability to step into another person's life and to walk in their pain, their joy, their dreams. For half a century, he's been our mirror, showing us the best and worst parts of ourselves through his unforgettable characters. And even now, at over 80 years old, Robert De Niro still works, still searches, still creates. Not for fame, not for applause, but because storytelling is who he is, and who he's always been. He once said, "Time goes on. So you just do the best you can, no matter what happens." And maybe that's what makes him timeless. So here's to Robert De Niro, the artist who gave us truth when the world preferred fiction. The craftsman who taught us that greatness is quiet, discipline is sacred, and art is eternal. The boy from Greenwich Village who conquered the world, not by shouting, but by listening. In every stare, every silence, every scar, Robert De Niro showed us humanity. Not the perfect kind, but the real kind. And that's why, long after the lights fade and the reels stop turning, his story will live forever.